We're joined by Joeux9 today in our exclusive interview with Joe, the champion of the Limitless Kick-off tour. So, Joe, when it came to this tournament, it's a little different than normal because it was best of one open team sheet. Did you do anything differently in your prep for this tournament?
Not too much really, because like if cut's gonna be best of three, right? Like you kind of have to kind of think of it the same way. You can't like I mean, some people actually did have a different approach where they like I think geared a little bit more towards the best of one aspect, then kind of relied on like playing a bit better towards the end of the tournament, like in best of three. But I found that like I always, and this is just like me as a player, I really like consistency. So like typically with the teams I choose, like it's focused around consistency regardless of like the game. You know what I mean? Like it'll always be like what will net me the most wins as long as I play well. And I feel like that for me in this tournament, I approach it generally the same way. The only thing they kept in mind was in game one, I feel like you can afford to risk like certain leads or like call something out as opposed to in best of one you can't really like mess up your lead or you need something sometimes a little bit safer to deal with like any situation you could potentially be faced with, right?
Hmm.
So like that's kind of the difference there. I think open sheet really balanced it out though, because like that's why I was comfortable also bringing like a consistent team because I couldn't really get like joked by like a random tech or something, you know what I mean? Because like I knew everything that was on their team. So
Yeah, definitely. Like it's a much different tour, but it also relies on the same fundamentals that you always like
mm.
have, regardless if it's best of three or best of one, especially with the open team sheets.
Yeah.
So obviously you're a fan of Yveltal and using Yveltal. It's your basically your entire brand at this point. But is there what do you like about this format specifically, like with Yveltal? What makes it such like a good Jomon for you?
You know what it is? Yveltal is just such a unique Pokemon in a way, right? Like, first off, it looks cool, but that's like besides the point, right?
Yeah, of
But
course.
like, what I find really interesting about it is like the role consolidation it has all within one slot, right? Because typically you're running like an assault vest on it, right? And like you have a lot that you can do with it because even though it looks like okay, it has like three dark attacks and one flying move, you can use it as an offensive max Pokemon, right?
Mm,
You can leverage it with foul play versus physical attackers that are trying to set up versus you. So, in a way, even though you're not necessarily reducing their damage, you're discouraging them setting up stats, right? You're punishing like a certain setup from them, right? And then Snarl is like the inverse of that. It's basically like you can snarl, you can reduce stats, you can kind of play a slower game, and then you also have like Sucker Punch, which kind of gives you like some leverage to like hit things that are faster than you, weaken some damage, maybe take something out. And like what I think is so interesting about that like Pokemon and moveset as a whole is it has so much control over the pace of the game, and I think that that's something that's really crucial in GS Cup formats that I really like is having control over the pace of the game, right?
yeah, of course.
And you can kind of see that through some of the best teams I think in the format that a lot of them exert some form of control. Even something like Vine Lash, you're still, even though it's more offensive, you're still exerting control because you're forcing your opponent to be mindful of the chip they're taking every single turn, right? Or something with like screens, Thunderwave, anything like that. So that's why I like it a lot. I just feel like it consolidates like a lot of different ways to stop your opponent from setting up or getting as much damage out all into one Pokemon, which I just think is really cool. And it can work with a lot of partners, so
Yeah.
it's kind of fun.
So you mentioned, obviously GS Cups, and you're very well known for competing in GS Cup. I'd say that's where you really started to get your start and like make your name for yourself was in Ultra Series with Yveltal as well. But
Yeah.
what do you think? Like you mentioned it earlier as we were talking before the before we started recording. But how do you feel about like GS Cups and like team building in them as opposed to like regular formats?
So I feel like it's almost formulaic in a way, right? Because interesting thing with GS Cups compared to other formats is they kind of all offer a similar structure, I think, in terms of how teams are like constructed, right? So, for example, let's say we look at like a regular format, right? Like there's not really two specific Pokemon that you usually build around. You're more so building around a core that's strong, right? Or a couple different modes that are strong. In GS Cup, you're more so centralizing your building around your restricteds and what's going to complement them. Pretty much, you'll see that like it's usually two restricteds, two offensive Dynamaxes, two support options, right? And then like there's some variations on that. So some will have a support option that can Dynamax, right? Some will have your restricted that can Dynamax, but it doesn't always need to. And like even on my team, if we look at it as a whole, right, it basically had that formula because Rotom and Landers were the main max Pokemon, right? They both could function outside of Dynamax. Then you had the two support Pokemon, which were Grimmsnarl and Gastro. and Gastro could offer a max as well, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
Yveltal also had the potential max as well. So it's kind of like what I felt was really good about my team for this specific tournament was the fact that I had so many max options along with so many control options when the Pokemon were out of max, right? And they all could offer that, it like kind of combined different roles basically. So I just thought that was like really interesting. I think that's something that you see a lot. Like even if you think about the most standard teams, for example, like Zacian Kyogre, right? It's usually Zacian, Kyogre, electric type, grass type. Both of them can usually max, right? So usually Venusaur and like Zapdos. Then you'll see like Grimmsnarl filler, right? Or if you look at like the non-screen versions, it's kind of a similar concept, right? Zacian, Kyogre can sometimes max. Whimsicott, Zapdos, which can max. Incineroar, Ferrothorn, right? And Ferrothorn usually has like some move that can still allow it to max, right? So you kind of see like I feel like it's very interesting, right? Because it almost is like a formula, you know, it's like very easy, but the changes in GS Cup and the creativity comes from like the different moves, the different items, how you utilize something, you know. So
Yeah, of course. I think like generally when you want to get ahead in these formats, it's more about like figuring out a special tech move or mon choice that can put you over the same people running a similar archetype to you. Because we're looking at the stats today for this tournament, and I noticed like a lot of the Yveltalzation teams were doing very, very poorly. There was about like 3 of them that went positive, and obviously yours was really carrying the archetype as a whole in terms of win rate. And a lot of them were just making like a little bit suboptimal choices. Like they weren't too far off from you, but it was just a lot of like weaker versions of your idea, and yours is just like, you gave yourself the most options and you're the most coverage versus the matchups.
yeah, I mean, a few changes can completely weaken the team. I mean, a couple of because I had originally seen this 6 being used in Victory Road, and like I liked it, but like there were some things I saw that were like, like
Yeah, yeah.
I don't really like that too much, you know, and like I think a couple of the key changes on the team specifically that made a big difference was Play Rough on Zacian because a lot of them were opting for Substitute over Play Rough. Play Rough let me hit like other Yveltals and let me hit like all the dragons like really easily, which helped a lot, right? The Gastrodon opting for Recover over Protect. Personally, I am a big hater of Protect on Gastrodon. I think it's so bad, but like the reason why is because people say like Protect helps you keep it on the field longer, but realistically, you can majority of the time position it in a way where you're not taking tons of damage on entry, and having Recover allows you to stick on the field longer and waste your opponent's turn, right? So like that's kind of what I appreciate a little bit more, I think, about Gastrodon. In a perfect world, I think Protect would be the 5th move, right? But
Right, yeah.
I don't think you can afford it, and I think Recover offers more. And then like one other change on the team that I think made a big difference, or 2 changes, I guess. Landers was Life Orb Protect. Life Orb Protect let me just be really flexible, and I wasn't forced to like sit there and Swords Dance to get damage off. It was immediately I can max and attack, or I could protect and like play it a bit slower, right? And then with Rotom, I was running Wisp on it, so that helped versus my Calyrex Ice matchup, which actually did come into play for 1 round. Even though I don't think Calyrex Ice is that great, it's still worth like not losing to.
Of course, of course.
And like Wisp, anyways, it helped me versus Thundurus as well because I could sit in front of a Thundurus and a Zacian and just click Wisp on both of them, and it would be over, you know. So that was just like a couple changes I think that like were different from the other versions that made like a huge difference.
Yeah, I definitely think like I mentioned, like it's all about those small things, and then obviously just playing as well as you can. What goes into your prep? Because I know recently you mentioned that your prep has changed a little bit, and so how would you say that like for a tournament like this, how would you get ready, and what are your main like ways you get ready for a tour?
It's interesting, right? Because I feel like there's this preconceived notion that you always have to like grind ladder for hours. You have to sit there and like perfect this team, right? And like the more I've played this game, the more I realize is like no single team is perfect. It's just it can be the best it can be for a certain tournament, right? And like I had a great talk with Aaron Trailer. I think it was like already like a month and a half ago. And this is really where my prep started changing a little bit. I talked to him and I was like, it was actually a completely unrelated question. I was like, how do you really balance like life and Pokemon, right? And like he said something to me when I talked to him about that, right? And he told me, he was like, sometimes it's better to be confident and come in with something that you know you can do well with and not spend like days and days grinding with a team to like do poorly with it, right? Because it feels like really shitty, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't feel great, you know? And it made me recognize too that like I've already done well with teams that I've made last minute, you know what I mean? Or like teams that I know just have consistent options that can beat my opponents, right? And like I remember after that day, I was like sitting down and I was looking at some Pokemon sets, and like One big example to me that sticks out is at NAIC 2019, Wolf was using Rayogre, right? And he had Celesteela. And it wasn't the fact that the team itself was even like that phenomenal. It was just the fact that Celesteela was so good, right? It was like
Yeah, yeah,
this
yeah.
one really good concept on the team that like pushed that team forward and allowed it to win. And like from then on, it kind of made me realize that it's not necessarily about having the perfect team, but like being a good player and confident in your own abilities, and like bringing something has enough consistent options where you can at least beat your opponent no matter what you play. You know, so I barely ladder anymore. I think my GXC is really bad. The only time I ladder is like for like helping people with coaching or like testing teams and stuff. But besides that, like I don't ladder like at all because I've had so many good ideas that I've tested on ladder. I lose like 3 games in a row to something random, and I'm like, I hate this team, and then I bring it anyways, and I'm like, and then I like win or like I do well with it. I'm like, dude, like why did I even stress? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So like this team, I tested on ladder for like 5 games. I did awful with it. It literally lost every single game, and I was like, this is a good team, man. Like I'm just psyching myself out. I locked it in, I brought it in, like I did well with it, you know?
Yeah, you won, so.
Yeah, and like I don't know, I just feel like that sometimes players put so much pressure on themselves, like, oh, I have to like go like top of the ladder, you know. But like that's not what's gonna win you the tournament. What's gonna win you the tournament is you having a good team and playing well at that time. You know what I mean? You get number one as ladder on ladder as much as you want, but if you don't like have the right mentality going into the tournament, you won't win. You know?
Yeah, exactly. So like with mentality, do you think I preach about mentality, and I think mentality's half the battle. Do you agree? Do you think that it's like one of the most important parts of playing
I think
competitive
it's like
Pokemon?
75%. I
75,
genuinely
yeah.
think it's like 75 because like you can have a perfect team, but if you're not confident in yourself, you're never gonna win because you have to be confident that you can make the correct calls. You have to be confident that you can make the correct brings in team preview. You know, you have to be confident that you can outplay anyone regardless of who you play. You know,
Right, right. Yeah.
and I feel like that all just is so impactful, and it's like it shows the difference between a really like top player, I think, and a like okay player when they look back at a match where they got really unlucky and they were like, oh, I got hacks out, like what's it called, like I got my win robbed from me, instead of looking back and being like, well, I did get hacks, but what did I do to like put myself in that position? You know what I mean? Like what could I have done better? You know what I mean? Like like if I play this team again, then what can I do next time to ensure that I'm not in this position, you know? And sometimes that stuff's not possible, you know, but like even looking at it like that and having a different mentality towards that can help you so much, you know? I think another thing too that people really struggle with, and this is something I struggled with for a while, was dealing with a loss and then playing next round and like not letting it get to you,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? I think it's something that might just come with experience, but like I think now like I'm very much able to be like, okay, I lost, I'm ready for next match, you know what I mean? And like I think that is like the number one thing that you can improve on always, because if you carry a loss with you, it's gonna affect you into the next rounds, you know? So
I definitely agree. I think that's a lot of newer players' weaknesses is just saying, "Oh, I lost because of hacks. Like I didn't do anything wrong. Like he crit me on the last turn. How could I have won?" And it's like there were 10 turns before that, buddy. Like you easily could have won if you just played any of those differently. But I definitely think mentality is so huge, and like just mastering your own emotions and controlling yourself in a tour so that you're not affecting round after round. I know I've done it. I've lost tournaments or done poorly at tournaments because I let myself get tilted or thrown over. So obviously you're a player who plays a lot of Pokemon, and you spam the ladder a lot, or you used to. Sorry, you used to.
yes, yeah.
And but you're definitely always entering tournaments and competing at a high level. How do you maintain the form to play so consistently? Because like we were talking before, your last tournament win was 3 months ago, which isn't even that long. You got second, I think, 2 weeks ago. So you're just constantly performing at this high level. And I think, like, at this point, I want to say you're one of the only Americans who's consistently doing so, especially during COVID times here. So how do you maintain that? How do you, how do you balance life in Pokemon and competing in these tours and still doing really, really well?
See, I think that's the funny part because I don't think I can say I have the perfect life Pokemon balance figured out yet, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's definitely interesting because now that Pokemon's like basically my job, right? Because I'm doing stuff between coaching, all my other like stuff, YouTube, Twitch, all like that's like my income right now. It can be very I guess it can feel very like it can feel like a lot sometimes, you know what I mean? But in another regard too, like I feel like now what benefits me more is actually the time I have away from the game. You know what I mean? So I know that sounds weird because like you'd assume like, oh, to stay in top form, you always have to be at the game, right? But like,
Yeah, yeah.
it's about maximize. I think it's about like maximizing your time when you are playing the game. Like so many times before tournaments, instead of like sitting there stressing or thinking through my team, I'll be like, I'm gonna go play Phasmophobia with Sierra. I'm gonna go like play a game with Sierra. You know what I mean? Like spend time with like my girlfriend or something. And like that to me has provided so much more value to me, I think, as a player, recognizing that I can take time away from the game and just doing the best with the time I do have in the game to like really improve. And like I think for me, what it's less so like about, you know, constantly having the practice to keep your form. I think it's just about making like once you reach a certain point as a player, it's more so just about playing in those tournaments consistently, right? Like having that right mentality approaching into them, like even just learning something from your last tournament. Like I learn and I improve so much more as a player from every tournament to tournament than I ever do from like playing ladder or anything, because I feel like through best of 3 or even best of 1, like these formats that test your actual knowledge and your comprehension of the game, right? Like that's what helps me improve, like playing every tournament back to back. Like that's why I play in them so much, because I think that you can't be the best player if you're not willing to sit down and invest time, even in the tournaments that don't like have money prizes. You know what I mean? Like, if for me, and like, I think it's just for me as a player, like I'm in it for the glory in the end. You know what I mean? Like you can get like $10,000 from winning worlds, but that's not what's gonna last you for your entire life. You know what I mean? It's gonna be the fact that you won worlds, you reach that goal. You know what I mean? I just think it's like the way you approach the game is what matters, you know? And like I think I've taken a lot of inspiration from Japanese players too, because you see those players have the most crazy consistency out of like any, I think, region, you know?
Yeah,
And
for
it's
sure.
discipline, you know? It is, they are more disciplined than any other like country or like players that exist in this game, you know? And like that's partially also because of mentality, but also too, it's the way they approach the game so differently, you know what I mean? And like I think that's what I've realized is like it's not about necessarily doing what like replicating what every top player does, because I don't think there's a perfect formula for anyone to improve. You know what I mean? Like there are certain things you can do to kind of work on your skills, but everyone is going to have something that works differently for them. You know what I mean? And like motivates them. The one thing I will say though, I think if you do want to be a top player, like if your goal isn't to win worlds, it definitely will like I think decrease your like probability of like doing really well, right? Because like if you have like a big lofty goal, I think it's really gonna like push you to like succeed, you know what I mean? Or like push you to like want to succeed, you know?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, my goal when I started was always to play on the world stage, and you know, I was able to do that. And then I went through a lot of turmoil and time of trying to figure out why I kept playing, and a lot of it is just to prove to myself that I'm good at this game and that I can compete at the highest level. And so I definitely agree. So ultimately, is your goal just winning worlds? Is that what we're shooting for here?
If I win worlds, my goal is going to be to win worlds twice. If I win worlds twice, my goal is going to be win 3 times. See, ideally, in a perfect world, my goal would be to have the most world what's it called, championship wins before Ray Rizzo. Now, I'm not going to play until I'm an old man, so we'll see how that goes. But I 100% will play this game until I win a world championship. I already promised myself. I had talked this year about this already. I'm like, I am going to play this game until I win worlds. I'm like, and like even after, I'm still gonna play if I enjoy it, and like that's my goal, you know.
Yeah.
Like, and I hope one day, you know, if I ever have a kid and Pokemon's still a thing, you know, I could maybe they could be a world champion too, you know. So it'd be cool, you know.
Yeah,
But,
definitely.
the journey continues, man, you know. Like I feel like as long as you always have like this mentality, like there's something more beyond what you've already accomplished, like it'll help you a lot as like a player, you know. And it'll make you enjoy the game more, you know. I've recognized a lot that over the time of playing this game, you won't always have people rooting for your success, but what you need to do is surround yourself with the people who do have your, like, you know, they really want you to succeed, but also too, like, understanding that the only person who can influence your success and your, like, I guess destiny, whatever you want to call it in this game, is yourself, you know. And that's what's important, I think. So
Yeah, it's definitely a little different. Like, there's obviously team games and stuff, but like in Pokemon, it's really just it's you at the end of the day, and you're the one who controls your fate here. So Pokemon is a very interesting game. It's a very unique game in my opinion. Could you ever see yourself playing something that's not Pokemon, or is this like the game for you?
No, this is 100% the game. I remember it like I had a period where I was like really burnt out of VGC. I think this was like between Series 10 and like Series 11, right? Because
Mhm.
Series 11 was like killing me, like that.
Yeah, yeah.
It sucks to repeat a format, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I was like thinking about it a lot, and I was like looking at all these other games, and I was like, and I found myself saying every time I play, I was like, this doesn't feel as complex or interesting as Pokemon, and I'd be like, damn it, dude, I'm still stuck with this game, you know?
Yeah.
And honestly, what I give a bunch of credit for really reigniting my love for the game was playing BDSP VGC for a little bit, because it kind of made me, like, when we went back to basics like that, it kind of just made me remember like why I love VGC so much, you know what I mean? And just playing a different meta game, and then like having this meta game that's fresh now, like I feel like so motivated to just like play it. Like, and also too, I really like double restricted GS Cup, so like
Yeah,
I can play this format I can play this like for months and I won't get tired of it, you know. And I'm really like, I don't know, like this game's just so unique, you know. I don't think there's anything like it, and that's both a good thing and a bad thing, you know.
Yeah.
But no, it's a lot of fun, man. I genuinely like smile when I think about it, because it's so funny, right? Because you'd be like, oh, I kind of want to be in a game that like makes more money and stuff, but like it doesn't give you that same satisfaction. You know what I mean? And there's just something so interesting about this game. Like, you know, I can't really put my finger on it. I think it's just like the amount of customization, which sounds weird because like everyone's gonna be like, oh, well, there's like a bunch of Zacian and Cineroar everywhere, but like the fact that a move or an item or like one change to an EV can like make on a game is like incredible. I think there's nothing like that in any other games, you know? Like that customization I think is just like crazy to me. That's my favorite part.
I remember I was getting lunch with Wolf and a couple friends once, and people were talking. They're like, "Wolf, do you actually like, play any other video games besides Pokemon?" And he's like, "No, nothing's like this game. It's so beautiful, and this is the only thing I ever want to play. Like, I don't want to play other games because this is the best it gets." And I think that's like a lot of people who play Pokemon are like this. They feel the same way, where there's like there's something about it, even though sometimes the company doesn't work well with us or the format sucks. We just keep playing. We just keep coming back to it, and I think that like it really says something about like they really created something really well, like really perfect here. But it's like nothing else. There's nothing like it. It's not like League, Valorant, CS:GO, COD. Nothing. Chess. Nothing relates to this game. It's just really it's really beautiful sometimes. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, no, you know, Pokemon is something that I think people don't appreciate enough, because even though a format can suck or something, right? Like, let's think even of like the worst formats, right? Like, for example, like Series 6 was probably like the lowest format.
That was the first one on my mind. Yeah, that was the worst one.
Yeah, right? And like, I even think back to that, but even then you could still build like, I found a team that was like bulky and defensive, and it was like, it's probably like my top 3 favorite teams I've ever made in a really crappy format, you know what I mean? And it just shows you like, there are always good things that you can pull out of whatever format you play. Like, yes, the format sucks, and like, you know, you'll get over it. It'll like probably change, you know what I mean? But like, I feel like in the game, like you're always gonna have highs and lows, but what will always be consistent is like that kind of, you can find new ideas, you know, new customizations. Like even if a rule set is kind of like crappy, like if you have a good mentality as a player, like you're gonna take that challenge, and then you're gonna find something you like, you know? It reminds me of a conversation I had with Chris Danzo, I think like 2 years ago, and it was when Dynamax started. I was like, dude, I hate Dynamax. And he's like, I know you. He's like, you're gonna like it once you find a team that you like, and like that's how it's been for me every single format. As soon as I find a team I like I'm like, yeah, this is fine, you know?
Yeah.
So I just think it's really interesting, you know?
I definitely think it is a lot of times. Sometimes it's just finding where you can find comfort or your niche in the format, with whether it's using Zacian plus Yveltal, or if it's using Corviknight plus Terrakion in Series 6, whatever it may be, you'll eventually find something that makes you feel comfortable and something that you'll actually like about the format. Because I think a lot of time that's what it is like nothing feels good to use.
Yeah. You know, it's, I think, because we talk about mentality a lot, I think that is partially mentality as well. I think, like, over the past year, even, like, my mentality towards that has improved so much, you know what I mean? Like, if I'm doing bad with the team on ladder, I'm also going to objectively look and be like, does this team have bad options? No. Am I playing versus stupid stuff that's making me lose? Like, yeah, you know what I mean? I'm like, okay, you know, it's fine, you know?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's a cool game, man. You know, like I genuinely have like very little complaints for Pokemon. I mean, I think it could definitely be a bigger game if like it was managed differently, but that's not a criticism on the gameplay itself. You know what I mean? Like obviously there are some mechanics I think that can be changed and like improved. But like for example, like the biggest one that comes out to me is like freeze. Like freeze should probably be like a special burn in my opinion.
Yeah,
But
sure, yeah.
like, just like small stuff like that, I think like changes like those would really improve the game. But like I genuinely can't look at this game and like hate too much about it. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So even Dynamax, like I know a lot of people hate Dynamax, like it's just another gimmick, you know what I mean? Like I mean, we had megas, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
We had Z moves, we had like all the other stuff. Like it's the same thing. It's just a different, I guess, application of it. And like, do I necessarily think Dynamax is perfect? No, but like, does it make the game interesting? Kind of, you know what I mean? Like, it's still interesting. It's not
Yeah.
necessarily perfect, but it's still like different, you know?
I think it's always about a game of adapting because a lot of people, especially older players, like they get really frustrated with the new stuff. And I've played for 10 years, like so I've seen it all. I've played with Max, without it, with Z-moves, with
Gems.
Megas, with everything together, with gems. So like at the end of the day, it's still like a fun game, and like I see Pokemon rise and fall, and I see players rise and fall, but it's at the end of the day, it's still fun, and I still enjoy it. And I think like that's a big part about Pokemon is it's really just about the enjoyment of it. It's like you have to have fun playing, otherwise you'll never succeed.
Yeah, I don't know. And I don't know if this is like every player, but like a lot of the reason why I like try so hard to do is because like obviously I do it for myself too, but it's like I want to be remembered as like one of the best players in this game. You know what I mean? I don't just want to
Yeah.
have like one or two good years and be like, oh yeah, he was really good then, and he just kind of fell off. Like no, bro. Like I want to be remembered as like one of the best players who's ever touched this game. Like like on a level of like Wolf or Ray. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like that's like my goal. It's beyond just Worlds. And like I feel like that's like really something that really like motivates you to work hard towards every tournament. You know what I mean? I
Hmm.
think it's less so about aiming for one tournament win as like I want to be the best player in the United States. Like I say that I want to be the best player in the world. And if I don't achieve that, then I still have something to work towards. And even if I
Yeah.
do achieve that, then I'm gonna be better than whoever the best was at the time. So
Yeah. Yeah, I mean it's definitely I think you're very driven, and I think you have all the traits of what usually makes a great player, and you're already showing it time and time again, especially these past like since Ultra Series. You haven't taken your foot off the gas really. So I definitely, I'm
yeah.
excited to see where it goes, where the adventure takes us. I'm sure I'll still be playing from the retirement home at that point. But like, yeah, it's really, I think you're a very interesting player, and I think you have a lot to offer. As obviously you offer coaching, you stream, you post stuff on YouTube. But I think even more than that, you just offer someone who's pushing the game forward. Like, especially because I think like a lot of content and stuff like that is very much geared towards new players or for like people can understand it. But then you're also just like even at the highest level, you're pushing people to get better or to match your rate at which you're going. Because
I
you
haven't. Yeah, it's like I haven't contributed anything if there isn't a player who can be better than me by the time I leave the game. Because if you think about it, right? Like in any game, right? You're always gonna have a player who's on top of like the food chain at some point, right?
yeah,
Like they're gonna
yeah.
be the best player and everything. But what happens after that player leaves? You know what I mean? Like you have to raise everyone with you. You know what I mean? Because you shouldn't be afraid to help other people improve because if you're the best, you're still going to show you're the best.
Hmm.
It's like the way I think of it is like it's like fighting okay, this is probably a bad example, but like if you were in a wrestling or like not a wrestling match, like a boxing match, right?
Hmm.
And like you're boxing an opponent that's like your size, you know what I mean? Like you're like structure or whatever, like they're just as strong as you are and you beat them. That's way more satisfying than just like beating a bunch of people who don't know what they're doing. You know what
Yeah,
I mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
like any average person that just walks into the ring. Like that's not like that's not fun. Like my like where I'm driven from is the fact that I want to be better than everyone else, even if everyone else is good. I want to be
Hmm.
better.
Hmm.
And like I hope that after I leave the game and hopefully I reach my goal, because I will work towards that, is that there's going to be someone else who's maybe even more motivated than I am and like does that,
Yeah.
because that's cool, and I genuinely encourage anyone who really has that mentality to like keep it up, like even my friends sometimes they'll be like, oh, like I don't really feel like playing like ladder cast. I'm like, no dude, like you can do this, just play, you know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like you can do that. And I feel like that mentality is what's going to change this game from being a game that's just limited to the few like elite top players to a game that's open for a lot of people to succeed and thrive in.
Hmm.
I think that's something that I definitely would like to see change over time, and I think we see that changing through a lot of applications, but we also see the kind of retention of that like almost elitist top player mentality that I want to change. Like I want people to challenge me. I want to lose. I want to lose to good players, and I want to learn from it. You know.
Yeah.
And that's like to me like the most satisfying thing, because if you never lose and you never like take those losses, you'll never grow as a player or a person. You know, like it doesn't change anything. You know. And I think that in this game, what I've learned is that losses are the most important thing in this game, more important than wins, because you'll always learn something more from a loss than you will from a win, you know?
I definitely think like the mindset has shifted. Like from when I started playing, you know, players would not share anything. Like teams were not, you know, they were the secrets in the safe. You would not tell anyone, and if someone told them, you'd harass them on Pokemon Showdown, being like, "Yo, stop using my team. That's my 6. Get off of it," you know. And then now we have people like you, where you win a tour, the next day the video's out on YouTube. You know, like people are growing, people are getting better, just from having access to so much information. And I think that it's definitely a lot harder than it was, you know, when I first started. Like to be one of the best players, like there's just so much information being spread around.
Yeah, it's not the team, it's the player. That's the way I think of it. It has to be a game where it's the player that's the difference. In any other video game, like I guess Smash is a little bit easier to kind of express that individuality, right? But like when I look at Smash, like they use the same characters, but they play the character completely differently. I think of it as like the same application with a team, right? Like you can have the same exact 6, but you can play it 100% differently than someone else would. You know?
Oh yeah, like I do that a lot with Raghav and Chemo. Like us 3, like the way we play is all so different. Like we all use the same 6, but then when we go to ladder, Raghav will watch me play and he's like, "What the hell are you doing? Why are you maxing your Charizard against the Rain team?" I'm like, "No, trust me. Like I'm gonna do this, and it's gonna work." And like and then you know it doesn't work or it does work, and then we're able to learn from each other's differences in how we play the team. But like sometimes it's crazy. Like sometimes I need to sit down and be like, "Raghav, this team ain't clicking," and he's like, "Here, I'll show you." And then 5 games later I'm like, "Oh my god, I was playing like a complete moron," and like it just makes so much more sense. So it's definitely like the player and how they're playing it, because it definitely you know, changes depending on how you approach the game. And I mean anyone can play a team differently. It's really, I think it's really cool because I get to see it firsthand a lot of the time. But like yeah, even if you and I used the same team and laddered, we could both win, but in completely different ways with completely different Pokemon.
100%. I mean, I think too, what's really interesting to me is the difference between working with a group of people versus not working with a group of people. Like I have friends that I like talk to about the game, and like I'll help them out with teams, or like I'll talk to them or like give them some ideas. But I think like through me individually working on my stuff and developing my own like building or like how I approach the game, like it's been really helpful to me, and I think it's different for everyone, you know what I mean? Like and that's why I say that like the way that I kind of got to the level that like where I'm starting to be a little bit happier with like where I am as a player, right? Like I think it's very different for everyone, you know what I mean? And through those applications you'll kind of see like what kind of player you are, because some people work really well collaboratively and that like helps them a lot. And then other players, like keeping yourself and working on your own thing like helps you more, you know? And it's really interesting because you talked about how there are different ways to play. What's it called? I remember I was in a call with like North and Jones, right? Or NJ11. And I was watching North play, so when we play best of 3s even versus each other, right? North will like wait for the timer to completely expire. He'll think through every single line. Like he'll like really take time to think about the game, right? I always turn on timer versus him because he'll take like minutes if I don't. But like, and then for me, like I lock in my moves within like 5 seconds. You know what I mean? Like I play more based on instinct rather than like thinking of everything at once. Although obviously I do still have like certain things in mind like to kind of happen, but I feel like I'm able to like process the information pretty quickly, you know, and like it just shows like the difference between like every player, you know. It like it really does show you, you know, like how different everyone can be in terms of like how they look at the game, you know, and like how they play. And I just find it really interesting. And I think when I'm more experienced than someone, by watching someone else play, I can still learn something, you know what I mean? It's not like I necessarily can look at like maybe a less inexperienced player, you know, like even on like ladder or something, or like a room tour, like you can still learn something new every single time, you know. I think that's what's really interesting about the game. Like I think there's too much like when people look at top players, they're like, oh yeah, they have all the good ideas, like look at them. But like no, when you're a top player, the number one thing you have to recognize is there's going to be stuff that you won't think of that other people will think of, and you need to look everywhere. Even at players who are less experienced, because they can still have good ideas. And You never know. In 2018, no one knew my name. In 2019, I was cutting everything with one team,
Yeah.
like it just goes to show you shouldn't count anyone out regardless of where they are at the current moment, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? There can always be like that next player that's rising to the top.
Yeah, I mean, even in 2019, like I kind of knew of you because you were on Caleb's MPA team, and then you you top cut Nats, and it was like, okay, like like who is he? Like I kind of know of him, and then I mean, right after that, you top cut a tournament. The next tournament, you win. The next tournament, you get second, and so it was like almost like instant. Like once you hit that point, you just didn't stop. And I think
Just
like
clicked.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean like also like for me, a lot of times I used to read RMTs on Nugget Bridge where like these people would post their teams and they were awful players, but I would read their teams and I'd be like, wow, that's kind of a cool idea. Like you may not be like they don't know how to take the idea to the full potential of it, but they might have like a really cool idea. Like I know Raghav, he was playing like he made a new alt and he was playing at like 1200s on Showdown, relatively low. And some dude whipped out Bind Dustclops versus him, and he was like, "Oh my god, that's the most insane set of all time." And then we spammed blind Dustclops in tournaments for the next like 3 months because it was just so smart. But it was just such like a dumb idea from some guy really low that he didn't know what he was using or how much power it could have, or like there's so
Yeah,
many
to like
small
even trap
things.
something in. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
just
So
crazy.
like, buying Dustclops became one of Raghav's favorite things. But it's just like there really are ideas everywhere, and like you can find them even on the lowest of ladder or in the room when they post some team. You can find a team that might have one good idea on it, and I think it is important to always be humble enough to accept that like you're not perfect and you're not the only bringer of good ideas.
Yeah, I think humility, besides obviously, losses being the number one teacher, I think humility is like the second most important thing in this game,
Hmm.
because like I think if you allow your ego to like clash with like, kind of how you view the game, it's going to kind of make it more difficult for you to improve, to kind of like learn things from it. Whereas if you kind of have this mentality, being more open to learning new things, even where you feel like you're one of the better players in the game, like that's gonna help you continue to grow,
Hmm.
continue to stay on top and do that stuff. So I just think it's very interesting, and like I feel like it's weird because I remember when I was a and this sounds I don't know like it just sounds kind of weird but like when I was like starting out in the game I would look at all these top players and be like wow I idolize these guys right and like now I feel like I'm on par or better than these guys but like there's still something that I can learn you know what I
Hmm.
mean from
Hmm.
like each and every individual player whether it's a good thing or a bad thing you know what
Right.
I mean like I learn like what I don't want to do or what I don't want to be and as a top player now it makes me think about how I want to treat the people that maybe are looking up to me, or being that way, that really has impacted how I like kind of look at the game and like the people that I, even work with during coaching. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Because it makes me think about like what did I want when I was looking up at a player and I wanted to see them play or like I wanted to interact with them. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I think what's going to be really important, especially in these next few years, is going to be bridging the gap between the best players and like the players who are just getting started. Because I feel like it's very hard for players who are just getting started to really work with like better players to improve themselves. You know what I mean? And that's
Hmm.
where I think applications of coaching are really good, right? Because obviously, for someone like me who does this my job, like I would love to like work with a lot of people for free and just help them out, but it's my time. You know what I mean? It's my
Yeah. Yeah.
job. And I think we're gonna hopefully see a lot more of like those resources open up to players. I mean, even from when I started, like we didn't have near as many resources as we have now. Like the fact that I
No.
can go on Limitless and look at the most recent tournament and see
Yeah.
like the meta game, the stats, everything, like that's insane to me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
We could never do that before, so that's like so cool to me.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think we just need to continue that change. That's gonna allow people to get invested in the game and like help them improve.
I definitely agree. Well, I think on that note, I think we let's see. That's a
Definitely
good
talked a
good point
lot.
to end on. But thank you for
Yeah.
coming on, Joe. I greatly appreciate it. I always like to, you know, go inside top players' minds and figure out what they think, and hopefully, I learned a lot. I think it's really interesting, as a former top player to discuss things with, like seeing what you think and seeing what how I compare to that, but also just like giving people the opportunity to watch this video and learn, from what you've said, because I think you have a lot to offer and it's in a nice, condensed format. But thank you very
Yeah,
much for being on.
No, I mean, thank you for having me on. I do appreciate the opportunity to talk like this. I mean, the only reason why I don't usually do stuff like this, even on my own channel and stuff, is because it's like very. I guess it's hard when you're not having a conversation with someone else. You know what I mean? Like where they're kind of asking you pointed questions about it, because like there's like a lot of thoughts in your head. You know what I mean? So it's like it's hard to articulate that all in one shot unless you have someone who you can actually like talk to about it. So I do appreciate you having me on and like talking to me about it, because I do think it's very interesting, you know, and it's something that we don't really see from like a lot of content creators, players, because you don't usually get to see that, I guess, application of what someone thinks like in a format where you can actually like kind of digest it, you know?
For sure, for sure. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. I appreciate it. Again, all Joe's stuff's linked below, including his team that he won the tournament with, if that's what you're interested in. But either way, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time.
Peace.